Isn't it tragic that someone can travel thousands of miles in search of peace and adventure, only to find tragedy instead? That was the heartbreaking reality for Lisa Manders, who journeyed over 7,500 miles from New Jersey to Zambia for a dream safari, only to lose her life in a violent hippo attack. Join us as we narrate how it happened and what followed. The journey began with anticipation and eagerness. On May 31, 2024, Craig and Lisa Manders boarded a plane bound for Zambia, leaving behind their quiet neighborhood in Cranford, New Jersey. They carried with them a sense of celebration. 42 years of marriage, 3 children grown and living their own stories, and a single granddaughter who Lisa adored with the warm, bottomless affection only a grandmother could provide. This trip, a 10-day safari, was a long-held dream, one they had postponed many times for work, family, and practicality. Now, with Lisa recently retired from a 40-year career in finance, the time had finally come. Lisa had always been drawn to the idea of Africa, not for anything, but for its wild and vibrant beauty. She had pored over travel magazines and documentaries for years, fascinated by the idea of standing in a place where the world still breathed in ancient rhythms. Craig, more reserved and cautious, had agreed not out of wanderlust, but out of love. This was her dream, and so it became his. The first few days passed in a golden blur. The lodge was nestled between wide plains and thick acacia groves. The couple marveled at the elephants lumbering past at sunset and the distant calls of lions echoing through the night. Guided drives through the bush brought them face to face with giraffes and zebras, and Lisa was often the first to spot an animal through her binoculars, nudging Craig excitedly. In the evenings, they sat under the stars with other guests, sipping wine and listening to the guides share stories, some thrilling, some terrifying, about the animals they revered and understood. By the 5th day, the safari's tempo slowed. They had seen the Big Five and heard the distant cough of a leopard just before dawn. When the guide suggested a morning bushwalk along a river, Lisa was intrigued. She had read that these walks were among the most intimate experiences on safari, a chance to understand the land without the filter of a vehicle. The guides assured them it was safe. One of them even had a rifle slung over his shoulder, though it seemed more like a prop than a precaution. They set out in the early light. The grass was wet with dew, and birds chattered in the trees. Lisa wore her sun hat and light khakis, her camera slung around her neck. The group was small, just 4 guests and 2 guides. They followed a narrow trail that meandered toward a river. It shimmered silver in the morning sun, placid and calm. Lisa walked near the front, pausing now and then to admire wildflowers or scan for tracks in the dirt. When they reached the bank, the group stopped. The water lapped gently at the edge, and one of the guides pointed across to a muddy bank where a pod of hippos lounged, half submerged. Lisa edged closer, standing just a few feet from the water's edge. She turned and smiled at Craig, who was several paces behind, watching her with a slight unease. At that moment, the silence was shattered. A massive shape erupted from the water with terrifying speed. A hippo, not one they had seen, but one lurking just beneath the surface, charged without warning. Its bulk surged forward, water exploding around it. Lisa turned, her face frozen in shock, and tried to step back, but there was no time. The animal was on her in seconds. With unimaginable force, it lunged and caught her between its jaws. Craig saw her body lift from the ground, her limbs flailing as the beast shook her like a rag doll. There was a sound, some combination of a scream and a gasp, and then a sickening crunch as the hippo slammed her to the earth. Craig ran forward, screaming her name. The guides, 2 men who had earlier exuded calm confidence, stood frozen. One of them had the rifle, but it remained useless in his hands. They did not shout, did not intervene. They simply stood, then slowly began to back away. By the time Craig reached her, the hippo had retreated into the murky water, leaving Lisa lying broken on the riverbank. Her body bore the weight of the animal's fury, her skull fractured, her ribs crushed, her face barely recognizable. He knelt beside her, cradling her in his arms, whispering her name over and over as the soil soaked dark with blood. There was no medevac, no emergency response. The guides radioed for help, but it was too late. She died within minutes, her breathing shallow, and then gone. The woman who had loved Central Park walks and chocolate gelato, who called her granddaughter Little Bear and sang along with Aretha Franklin while doing dishes, was gone. The days that followed were a blur of numb disbelief. Craig returned home alone, her suitcase unopened, her perfume still faint on the scarves she packed. The grief hollowed him out. Friends came and went, offering condolences, casseroles, and cliches. But none could understand the moment that replayed endlessly in his mind, the moment he saw her die and could do nothing. The grief was not the end of the story. On February 5, 2025, Craig filed a lawsuit in Stamford, Connecticut against African Portfolio, the tour company that had arranged the trip. Represented by attorneys Paul Slager and Nicole Coates, the suit alleged negligence and recklessness on multiple fronts. According to Slager, the tragedy shouldn't have happened because there are basic safety standards that businesses in the safari industry are expected to follow. Those standards were ignored, and the consequences were devastating. The lawsuit accused African Portfolio of failing to properly vet and supervise the tour guides provided by Chiawa Safaris, claiming that the company vouched for their competence and safety despite evidence to the contrary. In response, African Portfolio's attorney, Rodney Gould, pushed back. He first acknowledged that it was a horrible tragedy, but he defended his client by saying it's important to understand what the African Portfolio's role is. According to him, African Portfolio didn't conduct the trip, but only arranged it. Gould argued that African Portfolio had no direct control over the guides or their actions, and that the responsibility lay with Chiawa Safaris, the Zambian lodge that provided the staff. Furthermore, he said African Portfolio had no reason to suspect negligence, as Chiawa had a stellar reputation in the safari industry. Gould added that African Portfolio would either ask a judge to dismiss the lawsuit or move the case to arbitration, a condition buried in the agreement the Manders had signed before embarking on the trip. Yet, the lawsuit does not mention Chiawa Safaris, choosing instead to focus on African Portfolio's role as the facilitator and overseer of the entire experience. Slager and Coates maintained that the company was not just a passive booking agent, but a trusted authority that vouched for the quality and safety of the experience. That trust, they argued, was fatally misplaced. Beyond the legal battle, the emotional cost is impossible to measure. The lawsuit didn't fail to describe how Lisa Manders suffered significant premorbid fear and emotional pain, suffering, and mental anguish in the final moments of her life. For Craig, the trauma of witnessing that moment, watching his wife of 4 decades torn apart in front of him, has left lasting psychological scars. The suit claims that he has experienced debilitating emotional and psychological injuries, making it difficult to resume even the most basic routines of daily life. His grief is compounded by helplessness, rage, and the weight of what-ifs. The lawsuit hopes to ensure accountability, not just compensation, to prevent another couple, another family, from walking unknowingly into danger disguised as adventure. It raises difficult questions about responsibility in an industry that trades in risk and romance. When something goes wrong in the wild, who is to blame? The animal? The guide? The lodge? Or the company that sold the dream? The truth is that hippos are among the most dangerous animals in Africa. The second largest land mammals, they can weigh up to 7,000 pounds, run faster than most humans, and are aggressively territorial. Estimates suggest they kill at least 500 people every year, though some believe the number is far higher. In 2023 alone, a hippo attack in Malawi killed 7 when it capsized a canoe. These are not rare freak incidents. They are warnings. Warnings that were ignored the day Lisa Manders was taken. Now back in New Jersey, Craig keeps a small photo of Lisa on his desk, smiling at the camera, squinting in the Zambian sun, her hat tilted back as she looks out across the savannah. He doesn't need to look at it to remember her. The image is etched into his mind. So is the riverbank. So is the moment the water exploded. The lawsuit is ongoing, but for Craig, the outcome isn't just about money. It's about the truth, about justice, and about ensuring that no other traveler entrusts their life to a dream, only to find it torn apart by silence and inaction. The river knew no mercy, but perhaps the law will. But till then, stay tuned and subscribe, as we've got more heart-wrenching stories coming.